Hi everyone, I am Michaela and I'm here with OC Habitats to present to you a presentation on how to effectively recycle. Now all of the research and the creation of this presentation was done by Duong, so thank you Tilly for providing us with all of this very valuable information. So one of our last happy hours, we left off talking about the 4 Rs, so reduce, reuse, recycle, and rethink, and how our relationship with those ideas has shifted and changed throughout this pandemic. Now, the best way to reduce your environmental impact is to always start with reducing and reusing, but of course it is all much, much easier said than done. So the purpose of this presentation is to answer the question of how do we recycle effectively for the instances where we are left with single-use items. So a little overview of what I'm going to be talking about today. First is big oil and recycling plastic, and then some general rules of thumb for plastic recycling. Going to play a little game called Do's, Don'ts, and Depends of recycling, and then we're going to talk about how to prepare your items for the recycling bin, some guides for recycling items of different colors, and what you should do when you are in doubt. So let's evaluate what we know. Can plastic be recycled? Well, the answer is yes and no. It very much depends on the type of item, so that can include the size, the color, and its overall quality. So the sad truth is recycling sells plastic. So Larry Thomas was a top official for the Society of the Plastic Industry, and he said if the public thinks that recycling is working, then they are not going to be as concerned about the environment. And now what this quote means is that Big Oil has created and used recycling as a campaign in order to sell the idea that plastic can be recycled, but in fact, it is very, very difficult. So in that sense, recycling is by no means an end-all solution. So why is recycling so difficult? Well, to start, recycling facilities have to do a lot of work. This includes all of the collecting, the sorting, the cleaning, the melting, and then the reselling of the plastic pellets. Also, new plastic is cheaper and it's of better quality. So oil and gas is what creates new plastics, and with each recycling turnover, the quality degrades. And so it's easier for companies to go ahead and just make new plastic rather than do all of the work to recycle old plastic that's only going to degrade in quality. And lastly, recycling is so difficult because most plastics do not end up at recycling facilities. Most plastics end up in landfills or in the ocean, and it is estimated that about 10% of plastic actually gets recycled. So looking at a timeline of about 30 years, plastic production is expected to triple by 2050. So what do we do in order to combat this? Well, let's work to recycle effectively. And it's by no means simple or easy, but learning how to recycle effectively can just increase the efficacy of the entire process. So some general rules of thumb for plastic recycling. First, if you can poke a thumb through the plastic, it does not belong in your recycling container. This includes things like cling wrap or plastic bags, and even the plastic cover that you can see in Kleenex boxes. That is because the plastic is too thin to be grouped in volume and sold to recycling facilities, since they can't turn that small and thin of plastic back into the pellets that are used to create new plastic. Secondly, on that note, do not bag your recyclables in plastic bags or trash bags. The same reason is that those bags themselves cannot be recycled. And so if you put your recyclables in a non-recyclable plastic bag, it limits their chance of being recycled themselves. Now we're going to play the game called Do's, Don'ts, and Depends of recycling. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to list some qualities or different types of items that may or may not be able to be recycled. And you guys have the chance to go ahead and pause the video, think about your answer. When you think you have your answer, go ahead and press play again, and you can see how well you do. So the first do's, don'ts, and depends of recycling is, do you recycle items that are smaller than a credit card? This can include items such as small pieces of shredded paper, coffee pods, or bottle caps. Now the answer is do not. This is because they are small enough that they can fall through the cracks in the machine at the recycling center and will just end up in the garbage themselves. For items like shredded paper contained in a plastic or a paper bag may be acceptable because the bag makes it large enough in order to go through the machine properly. Next list of items is, do you recycle items made of mixed or connected materials together in your recycling bins? I have some examples down here at the bottom that can include cans with paper labels around the outside, cartons with metal lining, stickers with adhesive on the back, or packaging with bubble wrap. And the answer to this question is, do not leave items made of mixed or connected materials in your recycling bin. This is often because the recyclable components must be separated and sorted from the unrecyclable parts, and sometimes the components are too difficult to separate, so it is thrown in the garbage. So for example, you're going to want to take the paper labels off of your cans before you recycle them. And stickers with adhesives cannot be recycled at all because the adhesive changes the properties of the paper and makes it no longer able to be reused. The next example is, do you recycle a piece of paper your kid drew on with wax crayons? Now the answer for this is do recycle paper with wax crayon on it. These kinds of drawings and papers still need to be reprocessed, and this is done at recycling facilities through a process where they boil these types of papers in a special mixture, and the wax and lead and other materials will float on top of this mixture and can be removed so that the paper can then be recycled. Next question is, do you throw away compostable plastics in the recycling bin? The answer to this one is do not throw away compostable plastics in your recycling bin. Compostable plastics require commercial or industrial composting facilities, and not all recycling facilities have these composting abilities. Your city or your county may accept compostable plastics in their composting program, but if it doesn't, the only option is to throw it in the trash, as household compost bins don't get nearly hot enough in order to compost these types of compostable plastics. Next one is, do you recycle items with a little bit of water or liquid inside? The answer to this one is, it depends. If there is too much liquid, it could seep out and it could soil other items such as paper and then ruin those items' potential for recycling. For example, food contamination is why those dirty, greasy, wet pizza boxes are often not recycled. The best thing to do is to make sure your recyclables are completely dry, or never allow more than 1 tablespoon of water to remain in a recyclable. Remember, if you are recycling something like plastic water bottles, be sure to empty out all of the water, remove the outer paper wrapping, and then crush it, and then put the lid back on so that it saves more space at the processing facilities. Now let's talk about how to prepare your items for recycling. First, what you're going to want to do is be sure that those items are completely empty, whether that is food, liquid, or other trash. Be sure that those are all emptied out. If needed, you might need to wipe or wash out your items, which brings me to being sure those items are as clean as possible. So get rid of any food that may limit its chance of being recycled. If your plastics happen to have stains on them, baking soda can be very helpful for removing those. And there are also products available for cleaning reusable drinkware that might get stained as well. Lastly, you're going to want to be sure that those items are completely dry. Like I just said before, liquid can contaminate different recyclable items if there's too much of it. So be sure that they are as dry as possible, and also be sure to put caps and lids back on bottles and jars. For the reason that I mentioned earlier is that caps and lids will be small enough to fall through the cracks of the machine, and then they will end up in the garbage. But if they are attached to their appropriate bottles, then they will get recycled through. A little lesser known fact is that the color of your recyclable items, such as paper or plastic, will impact its ability to be recycled. For colored paper, some very dark or bright papers that are dyed all the way through cannot be recycled. This effect is very similar to washing a piece of red clothing in a white load of laundry. Just like how you don't want a bunch of pink clothing items, the recycling centers don't want to contaminate the rest of their paper with dyed papers. So what you can do to test if your paper is dyed all the way through or not is something called the rip test. Very simple, just rip your piece of paper. If you see a little bit of white on the inside, then you know it is not dyed all the way through. But if you do not see any white, then it is dyed all the way through and it cannot be recycled. For dark plastics, most dark plastic does not end up being recycled. This is because dark plastics will elude the facility detection. They use spectroscopy technology, so it relies on visual detection of the different recyclable items, and dark plastics will often kind of camouflage in with the color of the conveyor belts at the recycling facilities, and so it is not detected and it will end up in the trash. In the UK, many supermarkets are banning the use of dark plastics for the reason that it is very, very difficult to recycle. What to do when you are in doubt? Do your research, hop on the internet. There's a lot of great local information out there, either per city or by county. And there's also just some great tips and tricks on how to eliminate and minimize your waste and how to recycle effectively. When in doubt, so again, either do your research or just throw it out. There's a thing called wishful recycling, which is including items we wished we could recycle but can't, and that ends up doing more harm than good. All right, to continue, we're going to be talking about some other different types of recyclable items, such as glass, metals, and e-waste, and then finish off with some additional tips and organization tricks, and then some spotlights of hope for this issue of combating plastic and trash. Glass, unlike paper, which can be recycled about 5 to 7 times, or plastics, which can only be recycled a small handful of times, because the quality degrades after each turnover, glass has an indefinite recycling lifespan. Aluminum and other metals similarly can be recycled indefinitely because their quality does not degrade with each turnover. But what glass items cannot be recycled? So that includes heat-resistant glassware like ovenware or Pyrex, most standard tableware, and even ceramic plates. This is because they are chemically treated in order to withstand the heat that they would experience in things like the oven. And so therefore it changes the consistency of the glass and can no longer be recycled. For metal recycling, about 40% of steel production uses recycled steel. And aluminum cans is one of the most recycled items. Aluminum foil is recyclable, but it is often lands up in the landfill due to too much food contamination. Fun fact about your local soil in terms of e-waste. If you were to dig up about 1 ton of soil anywhere in the world, on average, you could probably get about a half gram of gold. Now, on the other hand, when we are looking at e-waste, 1 ton of e-waste will yield on average 350 grams of gold. Recovering materials from discarded electronics is something called urban mining, and it is much more environmentally, socially, and fiscally responsible than mining for new materials from the earth. So when you're looking around your house and you see a bunch of old electronics like old phones or iPods, laptops, be sure to find an e-waste recycling center and drop those off so that all of those metals and minerals can be reused for future items. You can look at this web page that is down at the bottom to see where you can recycle your e-waste, or just Google local e-waste recycling drop off near me. Some additional tips and tricks and organization tricks for recycling: have categorical bins in more than just your kitchen. So I personally find myself in my bedroom with a lot of recyclable items such as aluminum cans, but I before only had one trash can. And so that made it difficult in order to recycle what could be recycled. I now have 2 trash cans in my bedroom, one for regular trash and one for recycling, so that it is easier for me to recycle those items. Also, just keep a positive mindset. Recycling can seem very daunting, and maybe it seems like you need more money, more time, or resources to do everything right. Just know that you do not have to overwhelm yourself. Just do what you can because every little bit counts. You can also take some steps to eliminate some single-use items that you use in your life, such as personal care products, and that can just overall make a long-term change in how much waste you produce. Also, try and recycle your water. For example, if you had just made, you had to boil water for some reason, the water is clear, just go ahead, wait for that to cool down, and maybe use it to water your household plants. Also, composting is a great option to divert food waste from going to the landfill. There's a lot of great options for household compost bins that are small enough to keep in your kitchen or you can keep outside. Also, for food waste, you can, if you have a lot of things like vegetable scraps, go ahead and store those all in the freezer. And once you get enough, you can make something like a vegetable stock and get an extra life out of that food waste. Some spotlights of hope. There is a new technology called plasma enhanced melter that is being developed to turn plastic and other trash into clean fuel for sea change ships. And Mr. Trash Wheel, that you can see here on the right, is a trash interceptor vessel that has collected over 1 million pounds of trash from the ocean. And there are other Trash Wheel members that are part of his family, including Professor Trash Wheel and Captain Trash Wheel. Just overall, there's a lot of new innovation and technology coming in order to combat this concept of plastic waste. And so it takes us all working together in order to make a difference. Thank you all for listening. I hope you all learned something new today and feel better equipped to recycle your single-use items more effectively. For more information about our organization or just general resources, or how to get more involved, check out our website at www.ochabitats.org and find us on social media such as Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at OC Habitats. We often post a lot more tips and tricks such as zero waste swaps, and just generally how to lessen your environmental impact on our planet.